Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, the World Economic Forum. Whether you think it's a high-powered business gathering or just a bunch of rich people in the snow, Davos does attract the big players from all economic walks. We meet some of them, including the head of the International Monetary Fund. But while they're talking about better growth, that's not helping everyone. Oxfam says inequality is getting worse to the point where the 85 richest people in the world have as much money as the poorest 3.5 billion combined. And Russia's dependency on natural resources, a new report says it's just too high and that the Russian government has to start diversifying. So around this time every year, we have the same debate about the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Now, I went there last year myself. You might remember the special debate program which we hosted. And certainly it wasn't a meeting which came out with any concrete resolutions or communiques. But then that's not what Davos is all about. Because when the great and the good gather there, it's about talking, networking, and access to big players in almost every economic field. This year, the keynote speech was by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He took the chance to remind everyone that Asia has become the growth engine of the world. But it's a world with rapidly increasing income inequality, a seemingly insatiable appetite for natural resources, and national economies struggling to find their place after more than 5 years of financial upheaval. In this program, we'll hear from all sorts of players at Davos, including the head of the IMF, Christine Lagarde. But we will start with our correspondent, Jonah Hull, high up in the Swiss Alps, on just what happened at this year's meeting.
Kamal, welcome to Davos, where, as ever, they're pondering the state of the global economy. It's not in great shape still, but things are slowly getting better. The organisers say they hope this year to push the reset button, to pull the world out of crisis mode. The mood then is one of cautious optimism. That's the economy, but don't forget there's politics going on as well. From Iran to Japan, from Israel to Brazil, world leaders are taking centre stage as well.
It's often described as a giant networking event, or as London Mayor Boris Johnson put it colourfully, a constellation of egos in an orgy of adulation. Love it or hate it, many of the world's most influential people are here again at the World Economic Forum in Davos, high up in the Swiss Alps. The headline appearance, that of Iran's President Hassan Rouhani.
No country can resolve their problems on their own. No economic institution can actually grow without paying attention to social issues. No power can have permanent domination over anything. Recent problems have shown that economic policies should be based on social justice and the interests of everybody involved, so that everybody's interests are protected, so that we have durable systems of governance, so that all people can benefit from them.
It was a speech that combined themes of conciliation, moderation, and, of course, investment.
I think those energy investments in particular would be of most interest. My guess is maybe the European companies will move first, because they've got a longer history there recently than the Americans, but the Americans won't be too far behind.
While politics and crisis threaten, as is often the case, to overshadow events here in Davos, attendees, who are of course some of the richest and most powerful people in the world, will try to stay focused on this year's headline theme. No less than the reshaping of the world, looking at the possible causes of future conflict and instability, like climate change, like income inequality, and the vast and growing numbers of unemployed youth around the world.
If you step back and you think as global leaders about this issue, why is it so important? We're thinking about the youth of today that are teenagers, that are in their early 20s. These are tomorrow's leaders. And if we lose this generation, who's going to lead us tomorrow?
Of course, unemployment remains a major problem in many countries. Davos isn't going to offer immediate solutions to that. It's not that kind of conference. This is about connecting people, about big ideas, from important speeches on the public stage to backroom chats and deals struck in private behind closed doors. And almost everyone here is at it, looking for their chance to do business. Back to you in Doha, Kamal.
Jonah, thank you for that. Davos often a good place to announce major economic news as well. And the International Monetary Fund did just that. It raised its global growth forecast for the first time in nearly 2 years. But it wasn't all good news, with a warning that richer countries are still growing below their full capacity. Ali Velshi caught up with the IMF's Managing Director, Christine Lagarde.
Madame Lagarde, thank you for joining us. This is your ballpark. It's the World Economic Forum, even though it sounds a bit like the World Iranian Presidential Forum this week. But this is about economics, and it is about a forecast that you have put out about the world. And I want to discuss that with you in a moment. But I want to talk about China. It feels like the untold story here. You know, Japan grew at 9% GDP for 27 years, and Taiwan grew for about 24 years. What happens when China stops growing at these rates? China is starting to slow down, and I worry that that's going to slow the world down.
Well, China has grown at a very fast rate and has absorbed a lot of the poverty that there was in China, which is good. So it has brought up the level of the income level for the average Chinese person, but it is still, way below where it hopefully will be when the middle class of China grows to a substantial level, which it has begun to grow. So we don't see China growth slowing down significantly in the near future. They still have a long way to go, and they still have a population to lift to that middle class level that they aspire to.
Like we in the United States tried to encourage people in the last few years to save some money while at the same time being consumers, China has struggled to make consumers out of their people, and some critics argue that it has not moved fast enough.
It has begun to move. And while the growth in China was predominantly driven by export, clearly investment has picked up big way, probably too big a way compared to where consumption is. So now it's a question for the Chinese policymakers to orientate the Chinese people into more consumption. But it's coming.
Your report also indicates that Japan may have left the worst behind them.
Possibly. We certainly hope so, because it was stuck in that 10 years deflation trap, which is always very hard to extract oneself from. So the triple action articulated by Prime Minister Abe and strongly supported by the Central Bank of Japan is beginning to turn into results. Yes, and we certainly hope that it will continue to do so, thanks to critical reforms that have to be implemented, which were announced by Prime Minister Abe as late as yesterday,
That's
if I
right.
recall.
Let's talk about Europe. We're here. You're thinking that the countries that use the euro will see 1% growth over the year in 2014. That's still tenuous, and we've still got some serious structural problems here in Europe. Give us an update on where you think Europe is.
Europe has gone a long way away from will the Eurozone break up? Is the European Union project still worth it? They've passed that stage. They've taken some real serious steps in the direction of banking union. They're not there yet, particularly in backstops and common resolution systems, but they have made huge progress. They have now built this potential wall, the European stability mechanism that they can erect in case of problem in any part of the zone. So those things are good, and there seems to be a common drive towards more integration and a reinforced political project. But they still have a way to go, particularly in the area of structural reforms, which some of the member states have done. This is the case for Spain, for instance. It certainly is the case for Ireland as well, and a few other countries. But they all have a long way to go. A lot of sections in their economies are still very well protected, subject to licensing rights, subject to authorization, and they don't unleash the potential that economic players can unleash in that part of the world, which is still a very, very large part of the global economy.
And where they have structural reforms to deal with in Europe, in America, we have political issues to deal with. And your sense that Washington got its act together a bit at the end of 2013 and 2014 caused you to upgrade your forecast for the United States. Still not great. I think we're looking at 2.8% growth in 2014. What does America have to do to get a little bit higher than that? It's not really sufficient for long-term sustained expansion in the United States.
Well, first of all, let's look at the rosy side of the picture. It is good, it is progress, and it's almost 1 percentage point more than last year. So they're heading in the right direction in terms of growth. And clearly the demand, it's fueled by the private sector. And that's a good thing, because we've observed a fiscal drag, because budgetary policies were, tightening public spending, were increasing revenues. And that drag is gradually fading away as we move into 2014. So growth in the US should continue to strengthen, which is certainly good. And we're seeing the unemployment rate go down. We're also seeing the employment participation not increase at the moment, which is a worry. But it is stabilizing. The Fed, the US central bank policy, is going to probably normalize gradually over time in a phased way. So all of that is good news.
Does any of that worry you as the Fed normalizes, which means they'll pull, they won't put in as much money every month to the point that eventually they're making no donation to the economy? The best estimates we can get is that mortgage rates in the United States might go to 6%, maybe a little bit higher. Are you worried that the United States can experience some massive slowdown because the Fed steps out?
The way the Fed is announcing its monetary policy going forward by way of very gradual, slow-going tapering anchored in the way the economy is working. In other words, if the economy is strong, if the inflation is low enough, they will continue to do that, and then they will eventually resort to monetary tightening when the time comes. So the way they're phasing it and linking it to the economic situation, I think, is the sensible way to avoid that monetary policy is a drag on economic growth.
And still ahead on Counting the Cost, more on that global growth, but the flip side of it. We'll look at an Oxfam report that says half of the world's wealth is owned by just 85 people. That is still to come. Now, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, it says Russia needs to diversify its economy. The short story is it's dependent on natural resources and won't achieve sustainable long-term growth like that. Russia has the world's largest known natural gas reserves, and oil and gas account for nearly 70% of its total exports. And that's not likely to change anytime soon, given the rewards. Oil and gas already contribute about half of Russia's total revenues. But the EBRD says that's just not enough on its own. Russia can't sustain economic growth like that, and resource exploitation can also make income inequality worse. So how can Russia diversify? Back to Davos now, and Kirill Dmitriev is the chief executive of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, a $10 billion fund set up by the government to invest in Russia's high-tech sectors. Now, the fact that you work for this fund, which is set up by the government, does that suggest Russia understands that diversification and getting away from oil and gas is going to be very important for Russia's future?
Yes, definitely. We've been investing, and actually in the last couple of years invested $3.6 billion with our partners in a very much diversified sector of economy. So we invested in healthcare clinics and telecom business, in Russian stock exchange, movie theaters. So Russian government and president definitely support diversification of the Russian economy, and lots of those sectors are growing fast because, for example, Russian middle class tripled in the last 5 years, therefore generating lots of growth in those other sectors.
And is there lots of interest in actually investing and developing in this sector in a way? Because I suspect that the easy money if I can say that, is there to be made, but that it's probably mostly in oil and gas.
Well, yes, because we just recently announced a couple of our first early exits, and on one we received an internal rate of return of 23%. On a telecom business, we exited 33% a year. So we can generate very attractive rates of return, and we've been able to build lots of partnerships with the leading sovereign wealth funds of the world. So China Investment Corporation committed $1 billion to invest in with us. Actually, quite a bit of money was committed from the Middle East. So Kuwait Investment Authority committed $500 million, Mubadala $1 billion, Department of Finance of Abu Dhabi $5 billion. We expect to have some deals announced with Qatari fund soon as well. So there is lots of interest in investing in those diversified parts of the Russian economy because lots of them are not public yet, and investing through private equity is one of the best ways to get growth.
And are you confident this can actually help the Russian economy? I know the Russian economy is very big, but we have to be honest, it is an economy which is stagnating. It's not in the greatest of shape at the moment.
Well, you are right that growth slowed down a little bit this year, but we believe that will resume next year. And if you look at the historical trajectory of Russia, the growth has been really astounding. Russia GDP per capita tripled in the last 12 years. Stock market grew more than 40 times in that time period. So growth has been very significant, and really efficiency and focus on diversification is something that can keep the growth growing. And Russia, for example, last year moved 20 points in the ease of doing business by World Bank, 10 points in the competitiveness ranking by Bloomberg.
Do you have to worry about bad press, Kirill? I only ask because when Russia hits the headlines, a lot of the time it is negative stuff. You know, Winter Olympics are coming up and all the talk is about politics rather than sport, isn't it? So I'm wondering if this creates problems, if it creates hurdles for you when you're trying to get people to invest and bring in money to Russia.
Well, you're right, and basically we believe that there are major misperceptions about Russia. So on one hand, there are some issues that Russia needs to solve, and definitely they need to be solved, but also the misperception of Russia is humongous, and I frankly believe myself Russia is one of the most misperceived countries in the world. Now, the way to fight that is that we actually started a program here in Davos where through some channels we are sharing some facts about the Russian economy. For example, that we have one of the lowest debts to GDP ratio in the world. And therefore, I think a more balanced view of Russia is what's required. And obviously the reason why many of our co-investors are co-investing with us, because they, through conversations with us, get a more balanced view of Russia, which is actually quite resilient and good economy.
And to that end, what sort of reception have you been getting at Davos? Tell us about what's been happening there.
Well, we just had a great reception yesterday. More than 300 people, top investors, came to our reception yesterday. And I think people are curious. People understand that growth is slowing down in Russia, so they're trying to figure out how growth can be resumed. But also they're impressed that we've done deals with the leading sovereign wealth funds of the world. So obviously there is something that they find attractive about Russia. So I think it's a curiosity in trying to figure out what industries can grow in Russia faster than GDP, and where can somebody make investment, for example, like infrastructure, where Russian government gives quite a bit of downside protection and additional instruments to protect investors.
Kirill Dmitriev, it's been very interesting talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Well, one of the problems of over-reliance on commodities, and this is also highlighted by the EBRD in its report, is an increase in income inequality. That's already a serious problem in many parts of the world. And the charity group Oxfam has given us this extraordinary number in a new report that half of the world's wealth is owned by, wait for it, just 85 people. More details now from Dominic Kane.
This is the Indonesian capital, Jakarta. As in several other developing countries, the economy here has grown rapidly in recent years. But Oxfam believes the richest 10% of people in such nations are doing much better than the poorest 40%. And it says the global picture is even more stark. Oxfam says half of all the world's wealth is owned by just 85 people. Together, those 85 people are worth $1.7 trillion. That's as much as the world's 3.5 billion poorest people combined. In Europe alone, the combined wealth of the 10 richest people is 217 billion euros. That is 17 billion more than the EU spent on 2 years of economic stimulus plans.
It's completely unsustainable. We can't see, I mean, in a world of finite resources, to have half of the world's people own the same as just 85 rich billionaires, we think is crazy and doesn't make any sense.
The report has been released just before the world's political and business leaders descend on the Swiss town of Davos for the World Economic Forum. In the past, it's been seen by some as an elitist group that caters little for the problems of ordinary people. But its founder says that is outdated.
Now it's time to look at the real fundamental changes which are happening in the world. It's a technology area, it's a societal field and so on, and to pay much more attention to those challenges which we have to face in society and in the economy.
The ravages of poverty and economic failure seem very distant from the picture postcard image Davos presents at this time of year. Oxfam says the world's business elite need to do much more to ensure that the poorest in society share at least some of the prosperity.
To Argentina now, which knows a thing or two about economic suffering. Its economy basically collapsed back in 2001. And the bad news now is that its currency, the peso, is in its fastest fall since then. In fact, in just 2 days, it slumped 16%. Daniel Schweimler has the story from Buenos Aires.
It all came to a head on the hottest summer day in Buenos Aires for many years. Temperatures of more than 40 degrees Celsius, The peso on the official exchange losing 87 cents or 3% against the dollar, the biggest single-day drop in 12 years, and trade on the black market also strengthening against the battered peso.
This was not a situation instigated by the government. What we saw was the result of speculation by those who love dealing in the exchange markets.
These are difficult financial times in Argentina. The government introducing measures aimed at limiting the massive movement of hard currency out of the country. Earlier this week, it announced restrictions on internet purchases and took measures to control trading on the black market.
We will defeat whatever illegal activity with just one tool, the law. And the law will not just be accompanied by executive actions, but also with judicial power. Those who undertake illegal transactions will face the full force of the laws that govern this activity.
The reappearance in public of President Cristina Kirchner on Wednesday, for the first time in more than 40 days, appears to have done little to quell the economic uncertainty. Critics said she didn't address any of the major issues, including rising inflation and dwindling central bank reserves.
This is a biased market where you only have exporters and importers. So for me, the central bank is more concerned about the loss of its reserves. If I continued like this, I would lose hundreds of millions in reserves a day, billions in a week.
The country had seen continuous growth since emerging from an economic and social crisis at the end of 2001. But many of the wounds from that period have still not healed. Argentina has been living with economic uncertainty, especially here in the financial district, for quite some time. But it's not seen anything quite like this. The question now is whether this can be controlled or is the beginning of something far more serious.
Now, there's a saying that goes a little like this: there are only two certainties in life, death and taxes. So spare a thought for some rural businesses in Afghanistan who have to pay their taxes twice. Because to keep things running smoothly, you sometimes have to please the government and the Taliban. Jane Ferguson with the story now.
This is a government taxman at a mine in a remote area of Wardak province, collecting money. But just behind him are Taliban taxmen doing exactly the same. Neither side seems fazed. This is how things get done here.
In these areas, the Taliban walk around with their guns. There's no government here. We're only two people here from the government. They don't pressure us. There's no problem for us.
The miners have a difficult job, gathering limestone in an atmosphere of compromise. Both sides of the war are being paid. This Taliban commander says he is collecting the tax for the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. That's what the Taliban called the country when it ruled.
There are different people working here in different sizes of trucks. According to the weight of the truck, we take taxes from them. The minimum is $31. The maximum tax here is $91.
The drivers say the Taliban tax is simpler. Corrupt police officers are the main problem. To them, legal tax and extortion from government police are one and the same.
The Taliban just tax us once. Then they don't stop us on the road to take more money. But we also pay tax to the government, and they take more money from us, here and in Kabul.
There's a strong Taliban presence in Wardak province, and for the group, the money it collects here is as important as maintaining a semblance of its own government. Provincial and national government officials did not respond to Al Jazeera's request for comment on the situation in Wardak's mines. It is not clear how long this area has been operating under the Kabul government and the Taliban. What is clear is that both sides seem willing to accept each other's presence.
And that is our show for this week, but there's more for you online at aljazeera.com. You can click through to the programs link. You'll find the Counting the Cost page there with all our previous episodes for you to catch up on. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter. I'm at Kamal AJE. Our business editor is at Abid Oliver Ali, or you can drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is the address. But that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Kamal Santamaria from the whole team. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.